And all NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a NATO member. But the main focus now is, of course, on how to ensure that Ukraine prevails.
This is my first video update from Ayia Napa, Cyprus on a very, very windy Friday midday. Let's talk about some news. And remember the Hunter Biden laptop? 50 intel professionals say it's Russian disinformation story. Remember all of that? Well, it was all BS. Completely made up. Well, the laptop is real, that we know, but the 50 intel officials signing a letter saying that the laptop is Russian disinformation, completely made up. Fabricated. A complete hoax. And we now know that because yesterday it was revealed during a private sworn testimony that former acting CIA director Mike Morell said that the Biden campaign asked him to organize 50 colleagues to sign a letter in October 2022, falsely claiming that emails from Hunter Biden's laptop published by the New York Post were Russian disinformation. And you want to know who was behind organizing these 50 intel officials and who contacted former CIA director Mike Morell, who, by the way, is super neocon hawkish. He is no friend of Russia. But you want to know who contacted him? Take a wild guess. Just take a wild guess. A wild guess. I'll give you a hint. His last name rhymes with stinking. That's right. I was going to say former, current Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who was at the time working with the Biden campaign. Morell said that Anthony Blinken, now Secretary of State, was the senior campaign official who reached out to him on or before October 17th, 2020, 3 days after the New York Post published an email from the laptop suggesting Hunter had introduced his Ukrainian business partner to his father. So they created a cover story, plain and simple. They created a cover story. They got these 50 intel officials to say that this was all Russian disinformation, blame it all on Putin. Biden used this 50 intel officials letter. He used it during the debates with Trump. Remember that? When Biden said that 50 intel officials, they said that the laptop is misinformation when Trump brought it up during the debates. The mainstream media, they completely jumped on board. It's MSNBC and CNN, New York Times, Washington Post. They ran with the story that the 50 intel officials said that this was Russian disinformation. The laptop was complete bogus fiction, Russian disinfo, Putin meddling in the U.S. elections. It was all one big cover story. One big cover story. That's all it was. Testimony by ex-CIA director reveals Blinken and the Biden campaign prompted former spies to falsely claim material on Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation. All made up. All made up and revealed in private testimony. Why private testimony? Isn't it time that Mr. former CIA Director Morell reveal this information to the American public, like public testimony? I think the American people are owed this testimony, this truth about what really happened in the 2020 elections. Is this not election meddling? If this is an election meddling, I don't know what is. My God. My God. But yeah, Morell should be he should be brought to the House or the Senate, and he should say all of this in public. TV cameras there and streamed on the internet, on C-SPAN. The American people should know. They should hear it from Morell. I mean, they know now, but they should hear it from Morell. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And it's Blinken and Biden and Sullivan and Newland. And these are the people that we're supposed to believe with the conflict in Ukraine. And these are the people that we're going to believe about the possible conflict with China. These are the people that we're going to trust and believe when they tell us all the stuff that they've been telling us about Ukraine and how Russia's bad and this war is all Russia's fault and all of the stuff that they've been telling us about Russia. It's Blinken and these guys that we're supposed to take at their word, that we're going to follow to some sort of World War III scenario. These are the guys. These are the guys that we're going to believe. And I say that because there's still a lot of analysts who understand what the Biden campaign did in 2020, and they understand what the Clinton campaign did in 2016. But for some reason, they refuse to believe that the very people that are pushing us towards war are going to lie about Russia. For some reason, they believe that Blinken is lying about everything he did in 2020, but he's telling the truth when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. I don't know how a lot of these analysts, how they rationalize that. I don't know how they cope with it. Anyway, that's the story there with the 50 intel agents signing a letter about Russian disinformation. Hunter Biden laptop. Oh man, oh man. One of the publications that put out the Steele dossier, actually the publication that first published the Steele dossier, BuzzFeed News, well, they're shutting down. They are shutting down. And from what I understand, BuzzFeed is going to be absorbed or merging with the HuffPost, something like that. BuzzFeed's going to be doing something with the HuffPost, but the news division, BuzzFeed News, well, they're finito. BuzzFeed News to close and parent company to make substantial layoffs. Chief Executive Jonah Peretti says in a company-wide email that BuzzFeed can no longer continue to fund BuzzFeed News. I wonder why BuzzFeed News can no longer operate. Why is the CEO unable to fund BuzzFeed News? Well, I know why. Because BuzzFeed News didn't have a business model. Their business model was venture capital and equity investments, whether it was Disney or I believe Andreessen Horowitz invested something like 5 or 10 or 15 million in BuzzFeed News. BuzzFeed News was being kept afloat on VC money, on venture capital. And now that we have the situation that we have with interest rates and all of these things, well, the VCs, they can't invest in stuff like BuzzFeed News and these types of media companies that never had a chance to make a profit, but were kept afloat because they were really good at spewing out propaganda. That's why you have Disney and Andreessen Horowitz and these VC firms investing in BuzzFeed News, because they're being told to invest in BuzzFeed News, because BuzzFeed News is putting stuff out there like the Steele dossier. That's simple. BuzzFeed is actually a public company. Can you believe that? A public company. I believe it's on the NASDAQ. When it went public, its stock was at 9. Where is it? Let me put a chart on the screen here. Was at 961, and now it's at 0.75 USD. 92.20% down. It never went up. When it went public, it's been downhill ever since. It never passed the 961. Unbelievable. So within the span of a day, we have the media company that leaked the fake, bogus Steele dossier. The Trump is with prostitutes at a hotel in Moscow, peeing on the bed. That dossier where it claims that Russia has an embassy or consulate in Miami. That was BuzzFeed News. No one wanted to touch that dossier because everybody knew the whole thing was fiction. But they needed to get BuzzFeed News to do it. Report on the dossier, BuzzFeed News, and we'll give you guys another $20 million in VC funding. Right? Isn't that how it goes? Anyway, in the span of a day, we get the story about BuzzFeed News. We get the story about the 50 Intel agents and the Hunter Biden laptop. Oh, these people. These people. All they do is lie, lie, and lie. But it's Trump's fault, and it's Putin's fault, and Russia is evil, and it's Russian disinformation. How about Biden disinformation or Blinken disinformation? 50 U.S. Intel chiefs disinformation. And yet people are still going to believe the narrative that they're telling us about the conflict in Ukraine. People are still going to buy into that narrative. Oh, man. Anyway, let's move on to the next story. And I reported yesterday that Stoltenberg was in Kiev. Check out this photo of Stoltenberg and Zelensky. Look at how Zelensky's looking at Stoltenberg. Love is in the air. Oh, man. So Stoltenberg was in Kiev, and he said that Ukraine is going to get into NATO. Eventually, they're going to get into NATO. Their home is with NATO and the collective West. That's what Stoltenberg said. Eventually, Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. And over time, our support will help you to make this possible. Over time, our support will help you to make this possible. So Dmitry Medvedev, when hearing Stoltenberg make this statement, he said, translating NATO Secretary General's utterance from Ukro English into plain English, quote, over time means we'll join the alliance with the parts by then belonging to Poland, Hungary, and Romania. And our support will help you stands for it's so good that soon I won't be there. Yeah, in October, Stoltenberg is bolting. Most likely, we're going to see NATO Secretary General von der Crazy, but you know, it's so good being a part of NATO that Stoltenberg is going to be leaving in a few months. This is not the first time that Medvedev has talked about Poland, Hungary, and Romania taking a chunk out of West Ukraine. Medvedev actually put out a map once upon a time, like 7-8 months ago, about what Ukraine is going to look like when this conflict is over. And sure enough, he had Poland, Hungary, and Romania grabbing what is historically their lands. If you go back a couple of 100 years, and maybe even closer than that. But Dmitry Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine, he said that the inability of the EU to implement its own decisions on the joint procurement of ammunition for Ukraine is frustrating. This is a test of whether the EU has strategic autonomy in making new, crucial security decisions. For Ukraine, the cost of inaction is measured in human lives. And so, if the foreign minister of Ukraine is upset with the decision-making of the European Union and NATO, well then why does the foreign minister want to join the European Union and NATO so bad? If they're so poor, if they're so bad at what they do, then why do you want to join these alliances and these unions so bad? That's what I want to say. Why do you want to join institutions that are terrible at what they do and that aren't helping you out, according to Kaluba? And this has to do with the fact that the European Union, they can't get the ammo procurement for the slush fund that they put together a couple of weeks ago. And so Kaluba is upset with that, but you know, that's the EU. It wasn't so much about the ammunition as it was about the slush fund. It's more important to put the slush fund together than it is to get the ammunition. But Kaluba is pissed off about that. And I think he's more pissed off about the fact that the $2 billion in ammunition is not going to make its way to Ukraine, which means that Kaluba will not be able to get his hands on some of that EU slush fund money. That's really what Kaluba and Zelensky are upset about. And there are rumors, and these are just rumors, but there are rumors that Zelensky is now telling his masters in NATO and the Pentagon and the European Union, the United States, he's actually telling them that he's not going to go on the spring counteroffensive unless he gets the ammunition and the weapons, fighter jets and tanks and stuff like that. You see, Zelensky, he wants to get a lot of these weapons onto the weapons market, right? Zelensky and his generals, they want to make some more money on weapons sales. So he's saying, look, either hand us a bunch of weapons and do it now, F-16s and more Leopards and Abrams tanks, or else I'm not going to go on this spring counteroffensive. I don't think NATO and the Pentagon and the neocons are going to be too happy about Zelensky threatening them with this no counteroffensive stuff. They're not going to be too happy about Zelensky's threats. Just saying, there are reports that the U.S. is going to start training Ukraine military on the Abrams tanks. I read that today. They're having a meeting at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, one of these defense minister contact group meetings where they all get together to plan out the war against Russia, the proxy war against Russia. And there are announcements, rumors, statements coming out from officials that the U.S. is now going to train Ukraine soldiers to operate the Abrams. So that's the latest from Zelensky and from Ukraine. The sanctions against Russia. Well, there are also officials who are now saying that the European Union is done with sanctions. There are no more sanctions for the European Union to put out there against Russia. They've hit their limit of, 11? It looks like 11 is the limit. And the reason that the European Union has no more sanctions left is because, according to this official, if they put more sanctions on Russia, they're going to end up having to create more exceptions to those sanctions than actual sanctions. So they come out with all of these sanctions like oil price caps or banning oil or gas or whatever they have to come up with so they could stick it to the Russian war machine and send Russia's economy into tatters. And the problem is they put out these sanctions, and then they have to carve out exceptions because you have certain member states saying, yeah, well, you can cut off the oil and gas, but I need an exception because I need to have my shippers ship this oil, or this oil needs to travel via the Druzhba pipeline, and so I need an exception there. And the EU is saying, if we continue to sanction Russia with whatever sanctions we have left, well, we're just going to end up having more exceptions than actual sanctions. It's going to be one big mess. And so they've reached their limit on sanctions, but we are getting reports, conflicting reports, that the G7 is trying to put together a total trade embargo against Russia. Now, these are just reports and rumors from various officials, but it does go against the statements from EU officials that they can't sanction anymore. They can't sanction Russia anymore, but the G7 is looking to put a complete trade embargo against Russia. So this is complete chaos. Who knows what to believe? But G7 countries, according to some officials, are considering a total trade embargo against Russia. Food and medical products will be excluded from this embargo. And according to this tweet here, they will gift a large part of the 90 billion as of 2021 worth of exports to other countries. There is no end to the idiocy in the bowels of the European Union. Well, the idiocy in the bowels of the G7, to be more precise, but we understand what this Twitter account, Stefan Demetz, means. So that is what is going on in the EU and the G7 with their economic war against Russia. Does this sound like a group of people that is winning? Does this sound like a bunch of winners going on and on and on about how to sanction Russia or how to put an embargo on Russia, and what should they sanction, and what exceptions should they put together, and what things should they leave out of the embargo against Russia? Does this sound like a side that is winning? Of course not. Of course not. And it's reflected in the de-dollarization. It's reflected in the de-dollarization. There's a chart that's going around Twitter and Telegram, which shows that in the past year, the dollar has lost something like 7% of its reserve status. It's had like a 7% drop in trade, the dollar. Meanwhile, the yuan has gone up. And all of this has happened in the last year. I'm showing you the chart right now. Yesterday, I believe that Russia is going to be trading with Bolivia, I believe. They're going to be trading with Bolivia in local currencies. And I believe Bolivia, if I'm not mistaken, Bolivia has a whole bunch of lithium, if I'm not wrong. I could be wrong about this, but I remember reading an article that Russia and Bolivia are going to be trading in local currencies and outside the dollar, and there is a whole bunch of lithium that Bolivia has. Anyway, how about this Washington Post story? Ukraine planned attacks on Russian forces in Syria. Leaked documents show. The Discord leaks last winter. Ukraine's military intelligence directorate put in motion strikes on Russian troops and Wagner mercenaries in Syria before President Zelensky directed a halt to the operations. How about this story from the Washington Post? Courtesy of the Discord leaks. Is that what we're calling these leaked documents, the Discord leaks. Anyway, in summary, what the Washington Post is reporting on, according to the document leaks, is that the Ukraine military and the Ukraine SBU and the intel services, they wanted to open up a second front against Russia, and their thinking was Syria, and they wanted to train and arm the SDF forces that were fighting Assad and the Russian military in Syria. So they wanted to arm these SDF forces so that they can distract Russia, pull some Russian military resources from Ukraine to Syria, and just basically open up a type of second front against Russia. But that's not the interesting part about this story. According to the leaks, one of their plots, one of their ideas, was to actually get Turkey involved. Now, the interesting part is that the SDF is the enemy of Turkey, because it's basically what the Turks consider the part and offshoots of the Kurds and the PKK, and so Turkey considers the SDF hostile to Turkey. But the thinking was, and now follow me on this, and I hope I explain this well. The thinking was that Ukraine would recruit Turkey to help arm and train the SDF forces, even though the SDF forces were considered an enemy of Turkey, because Turkey would benefit by having Russia attack the SDF forces, therefore attacking and destroying their enemy. Does that make sense? I think I explained that well. And allegedly, Zelensky called this off. I don't think Zelensky called this off. I think the Pentagon probably called this off, and they said, this is ridiculous, this is stupid, this is very complicated. But that was the thinking. That was the interesting part about this story, was the Turkish angle, getting Turkey to arm their enemy so that their enemy can then attack Russia, and then Russia would then attack Turkey's enemy, and Ukraine would then get Russia distracted from the conflict in Ukraine, and they would both benefit in a way by arming and training the SDF. An interesting story from the Washington Post and from the Pentagon. I was going to say the Pentagon leaks, the Discord leaks. An interesting story there. Since we're on the subject of Syria, real quick, we have the U.S. State Department. Their first deputy press officer, Vedant Patel, said during a press briefing that the U.S. does not believe Syria deserves a return to the Arab League at this time. Yep, the U.S. doesn't want peace in the Middle East. They don't want peace in the Middle East. And the U.S. doesn't believe that Syria should be allowed back into the Arab League. And when was the U.S. part of the Arab League? I think that's the relevant question to ask, because the U.S. seems to be making recommendations to the Arab League, of which it is not a part of. But the U.S. just does not want any type of rapprochement and peace in the Middle East. It is super windy, so we are going to see how the audio turns out for this video. I've got my dead cat wind guard on the microphone, so let's see how all of this turns out, because it is super windy. Let's do 2 more stories, and one of those stories is the clown world. The first story is that not the blue check mark, I'm getting ahead of myself, the state media government-funded label that has been popping up on accounts like the BBC and NPR and the CBC, that has now disappeared on Twitter. And actually, the state-funded media, government-funded media label on Twitter profiles has disappeared from all media profiles, including RT and CGTN and Global Times, and every media company now has had the state media, government-funded media label removed. So it looks like Elon Musk was putting the state media, government-funded media label on all media across the board, fairly and equally, including Collective West Media. And now it seems like Twitter has decided, or Elon Musk has decided, you know what? Let's just remove the state media label altogether. And maybe this was Musk's way of trolling the Collective West Media, or teaching the Collective West Media a lesson, humbling them, knocking them down a couple of pegs, you know, because they were so happy calling RT or Global Times state media, and they would like to poke fun at those media operations because they had the state media label on their Twitter profile. And so maybe Elon Musk was like, you know, I'm going to teach you guys a lesson, and I'm going to put that same label on your profile and see how you like it. And they didn't like it, and they threw a big hissy fit, and they freaked out. And now he's saying, okay, now that I've taught you guys a lesson, let's remove this stupid state media label altogether. Maybe that was his thinking. I don't know. But staying on Twitter, and this is my clown world, the blue check mark of Bill Gates is gone, and the blue check mark of Hillary Clinton is gone. Now, obviously, Bill Gates and Hillary Clinton may have the $6 or $7, $10 or whatever it is to pay monthly for that blue check mark, but obviously they're not paying for that blue check mark, probably out of principle, because we all know that Bill Gates and Hillary Clinton are very principled people. Very principled people. So they're obviously not paying for that blue check mark. And you know, Bill Gates, whatever, that's fine, but Hillary Clinton getting her blue check mark taken away, I don't know. I don't know, Elon. Be very, very careful. Be very careful when crossing the Clinton mafia. I think the last person to mess around with Clinton's blue check mark was Epstein. And we all know what happened there. Oh man, that's a joke, but kind of a joke. Anyway, that's my clown world. That's the video. I was going to make the Canadian politicians deciding to wear high heels in order to fight against gender violence. I was going to actually make that video and that story be my clown world. The fact that Canadian politicians were walking around Parliament or their offices, I guess. I'm not sure where. But the fact that they were walking around wearing pink high heels in order to make a statement about gender violence. I was going to make that into my clown world, but I guess I kind of have in a way. But I just wonder, aren't there better ways as a man, as a politician, as a professional, as a representative, aren't there better ways to bring attention to violence or to gender violence without having to resort to wearing pink high heels? I mean, isn't there a better way to do that? I don't know. Just a thought there. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's the video, guys. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble and Rockfin and BitChute, ODYSEE, Telegram. Go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code Good Day. I really, really hope this video's audio turns out okay because it has been super, super windy. Anyway, take care, everybody.